Köhler presents.
In the landscape of footy manager games, there is a particular brand of games that need their own category in any attempt to tell the story of these games. The German games. Often full of innovation and with a love for lots of detail, and a knack for creating completely incomprehensible picture-based menus, the Germans created their own brand of footy management. There will eventually be other parts to this German saga on the channel. After all, I've spent more time with Andreas Oswald's Championship Soccer than any other player career game, and I've spent too much time cross-referencing manuals to decipher the madness that is Software 2000's options menus to never do a video about them. For this first episode, I'm going to concentrate on a German developer that made a worldwide impact on footy management games. He helped evolve and develop the genre for over 30 years, and he did create one of my favorite footy management games of all time. That developer is of course Gerald Köhler. Köhler's breakthrough game was of course Anstoss, or On the Ball League Edition, as it was known in the English-speaking world. Köhler began working on it as a hobby project on his C64. Eventually it became a hobby project on the Atari ST, and the manual somehow ended up in a bathtub with infamous German games producer Holger Flettmann, who had just started a new company named Ascon. Flettmann liked the game and managed to convince Köhler to join Ascon and refine his game. Ascon touted their game as the soccer game to end all soccer games in previews. Released in 1993, Anstoss was an instant hit in Germany. It had a foundation of a solid but simple management game with the added flair of hand-painted graphics, both as backgrounds and as animated match sequences. The game used a level system for player skills and a value for form. It was a simple model, but it worked well in combination with the slightly eccentric but beautiful graphics that really managed to immerse you in the action. One of the major criticisms was the fact that your career was limited to 10 seasons. The first game in the series hasn't aged that well and is rather frustrating to play now, but it's still great to take it for a spin for nostalgic reasons though. The success of Anstoss led to a quick follow-up the next year with 1994's Anstoss World Cup edition. In this game you became the national team manager for a team you were choosing, and you guided them through the qualifiers and hopefully all the way to the World Cup tournament itself. This was a rather novel concept for the time. The chronology of the English language versions are a little sketchy, with different sources saying different things, but what I do know is that On the Ball World Cup Edition was the first game in the series that I heard of, thanks to legendary Swedish magazine Dator Magazine. It was also the first one I played. I still have the Amiga version and the CD-ROM version of the game, but I'm sadly missing the box for the CD-ROM version. I had some trouble getting my copy running in an emulator, although I tried installing them both in a 1.3 workbench environment and in a 3.1 environment, so I decided to go with the DOS version for this video. The game reviewed very well both in and out Germany and was an instant hit with footy fans. The game puts you in charge of a national team. Since it was released in 1994, coinciding with Sweden's World Cup bronze, Sweden are great in this, which enhanced my experience of the game. I spent many hours using the editor to enter the actual squads of the '94 World Cup. Both the qualifying phase and the World Cup have very detailed schedules to play around with and lots of options on how to prepare. It takes a lot of micromanagement getting everything perfect for your matches. Training can be run in a slow version where you actually watch animations of it, or just a brief text version. Training, team meetings, player talks and even press conferences are an integral part of preparation. Despite, or maybe because of, the micromanagement, this game really immerses the player in the process and gives an unmatched feeling of being a national manager that no other game has managed to match before or since. The constant flow of bad jokes in the magazine does break immersion a little. It's all very German.
Ich werde jetzt Deutsch Witz sagen. Und Wutschmacher kauft ein Muschli-Box. Ich werde jetzt noch ander Witz sagen.
Once you get to the matches, they use an updated version of the on-the-ball match graphics, which were wonderful for the time. Following your team is a tense and exciting experience. I love this game. On the Ball and its World Cup update turned out to be the only Anstoss series games released in English. Why? I have no idea. On the horizon for Köhler and Askeron, now rebranded Askeron because of a dispute with telecom company Ascom, was Anstoss 2, which came out in 1997, with an extended version called Verlängerung in 1998. The sequel was much anticipated in Germany and reviews were positive, but it passed the rest of the world by rather unknown. It was an upgrade on the first, with a more traditional management menu, rather than the hand-painted graphics from the first, although the Anstoss ball mascot Palino is featured more prominently in this. It added common features from other management series, like a real career option, where you had to start with a lower tier team, and it wasn't restricted to one country. With the Verlängerung extension, you could even select 3 countries at once. It doesn't sound like much now, but this was also one of the main selling points for Championship Manager 2 97-98 version. Anstoss 2 also removed the limitation of 10 seasons from the first game. I never cared much for Anstoss 2 and I didn't play it a lot. The matches in Anstoss 2 plays out in pre-rendered 3D scenes that lack much of the excitement of the match sequences in the first 2 games, and it also lacks all the charm they had. It was still a hit in Germany. PC Player gave it 5 out of 5. The third game in the series went for a fully modern approach, with a state-of-the-art 3D engine. Expectations were sky high at this point, and Köhler himself has described the development process as hellish. The game had a lot of bugs on release and wasn't finished. Köhler calls it a horror project. After the issues were ironed out, there was a solid game to be played. It still retained some of the charm of the first outings, while bringing the series into the modern era with a 3D engine that was good for its time. The fact that the English fans sing in German is a bit of an immersion breaker though. The game still uses the patented Köhler approach of levels and form as the main way of telling players apart, but the special abilities are recognizable from before. This does make the 3D engine kinda redundant, because there's not a lot of variety to how the players play, with so few things telling them apart. The matches are still fun to watch, and I watch any big games in 3D. An add-on called Golden Goal was announced for 2001, but was later cancelled due to technical difficulties, integrating it into the code that was partly left over from Anstoss 2. The game has retained a following all the way to the present day, and I could still find updated and extended squads from a few years ago. Köhler's Anstoss trilogy still holds its place at the top of German footy management games. Mr. Köhler recognizes that other German developers came before him, and that other games were more polished when On the Ball arrived. But none of the other series had the same staying power with the fans. The second and third games were really popular in Germany, but not as much in the rest of the world. The main reason for this is perfectly obvious. They were only released in the German language.
I really don't know any German.
That's all right. I know a little German. He's sitting over there.
After the third game, Gerald Köhler and programmer Ralf Langenberg had an offer from Electronic Arts to work on their management series, and they left Askeron. Askeron went on to create a few more iterations of Anstoss, but these games never matched the original trilogy. Not in quality nor in popularity. Holger Flötman was by many accounts a visionary game designer, but he was likely not the shrewdest of game producers. Askeron went bankrupt twice before finally closing its door a decade after Anstoss 3, with games like Anstoss 4 and Sacred 2 costing many times the money in development that they ever made for the company. It's not possible to go through every iteration of the games Köhler designed for Electronic Arts. The video would be hours long. We will have to make do with landing on some specific spots in the series. With Langenberg and Köhler at Electronic Arts, the series was soon renamed from FA Premier League Football Manager to Total Club Manager. The first iteration being TCM 2003, released in 2002. With EA's backing, Köhler could concentrate on game design, and he describes the time at EA as some of his best as a developer. To me, the TCM games represent peak Köhler, if you will. There is a near perfect balance of Electronic Arts polish and Anstoss backbone. The players still have levels and special abilities, now represented by numbers rather than symbols, thankfully, It is a game that tries to immerse you in the gaming world, a thing I always appreciate. I still pull TCM 2004 out of the shelf to play occasionally. These years also represent the last time Landskrona boys were in the Swedish Premier, and there are mint versions of the club to manage, so I'm kind of partial to this part of the series. The game runs on an older version of the FIFA engine, and it works very well as a management engine. It's not perfect, but it showed promise. The series was rebranded again after the third TCM game, TCM 05. Sports Interactive had bought the Football Manager name and rebranded their franchise as Football Manager 2005. And Electronic Arts followed suit, rebranding their game to FIFA Manager 06, going in an obvious attempt to compete with SI and Sega.
Your information, gentlemen. I intend to bring down your queen and country.
Gerald Köhler set up a new studio called Bright Future to produce these games. With FIFA Manager they went further than rebranding though. Gone are player levels, replaced by Champman-like attributes. It was an inevitable change in the evolution of the game, and I think it was a good decision, but the game still lost some of its charm. I do also think that taking up the fight with Football Manager instead of sticking to your guns, while maybe also inevitable from a business perspective, was ultimately the series' undoing. For the time being, FIFA Manager had the huge advantage of a state-of-the-art 3D engine. My favorite of the FIFA Manager games is the 08 version. I put many hours into that and enjoyed both the club and international management immensely. Although the players now had many different attributes, the series had not completely done away with special abilities. They were still there in the form of player styles. This was something that Sports Interactive didn't have at the time. The player styles worked very well. Players played to their style, and you could change the face of a game by putting a player of different style on the pitch. One of the apparent problems was that the engine kept changing with FIFA, and a lot of the development team's time had to go into readjusting the engine to a management game. Eventually the team decided to stay with the same version of the engine and refine it rather than having to redo the AI work and such with every iteration of the game. This gave the game a stability and the team an opportunity to focus on developing other areas of the game. It was an opportunity I don't think they fully utilized. By the start of the next decade, the games were starting to feel stale, and I often didn't feel there was a point to buying every iteration. The engine was also in a cul-de-sac where it didn't feel like it was being refined, and it also felt like it was falling behind the FIFA engine more for every year. Football Manager introduced their own 3D engine with Football Manager 09, and suddenly the walls were closing in on the Electronic Arts series. Unfortunately for footy management gamers, this was also the final time to date that any kind of innovation was seen around the genre of footy management. It's hard to tell FIFA Manager 09 apart from FIFA Manager 14 at a glance, just like I really can't see all the new stuff Sports Interactive says they put into their game every year. The games always had some really annoying features that were never really ironed out. A fun part of the game was managing the player's form and mood, and it really made a difference for the team. It was infuriating though when you forgot to book a Christmas party for your club and all your moral work for the last season and a half was shattered by one oversight. The series came to an abrupt but not surprising end with FIFA Manager 13. There is a FIFA Manager 14, but it's just 13 with unlocked features and a poorly updated database. The best way to play this game today, providing you can find a copy of 13 or 14 as none of them are on sale anymore, is to play the fan-made Season 20 or 21 updates. They're extremely well made and improves on both game and UI in major ways that put the originals to shame. I'll put a link in the description. Gerald Köhler himself seemed to stop making footy games. Bright Future kept going, doing other things like browser games. In 2018, news broke that Köhler and Langenberg, along with another member of the team that made the TCM games, Dirk Winter, had created a new studio called Winning Streak Games. In March of 2021, THQ announced a new game designed by Köhler and developed for Winning Streak Games, We Are Football. Maybe Köhler and Langenberg have the footy manager revolution for us that the genre very much need. From trailers and previews, We Are Football looks like a classic manager game. From the screenshots, it looks like the level system is making a comeback, and one other exciting feature that I'm much looking forward to trying is the option to manage women's teams, even if it seems you cannot run men's and women's league at the same time in the first version. Come June, we will know if Köhler and Langenberg can recreate the magic of their early games.